Hello viewers, for DIYers here with another tutorial video for everyone. In this particular video here, I'll be doing a demonstration of how to repair failing clear coat. This is more of a budget repair without any expensive tools, and you can still achieve excellent results. Starting with the fender flares on this Toyota Tacoma. The driver's side of this truck was painted at one time, and unfortunately the clear coat is failing in some spots. I will be repainting the fender flares and fender to clean up a majority of the issues. If possible, remove any affected components such as a fender flare. The parts will be easier to work with, and there is no risk of getting overspray on the rest of the vehicle. As a rough overview, there are fasteners on the inside of each of these fender flares, then there will be clips in behind which need to be disconnected. Most of the clips did break, so they will need to be replaced. Preparing the panel, it may be a good idea to clean the affected area to remove any wax or any other contaminants using a dish soap or a wax and grease remover. Next is removing the rubber gasket so there won't be any tape edge. They simply pull off, and I will show you how to reattach them towards the end of the video. You may be required to remove any decals, rock guards, or emblems to achieve a hidden repair. The fender flare here has a polyurethane stone guard which will be getting removed. This can be done using a heat gun. Due to someone's poor workmanship, they didn't remove the stone guards and instead painted right over top of them. You can see the original paint in below once the stone guard is removed. These stone guards are supposed to be clear, and we can also see a heavy paint edge. While the clear looks in good shape on some spots, when applying excessive pressure with my finger, you can see the existing clear coat is delaminating very easily. Therefore, the existing clear coat layer will need to be sanded down, otherwise the new paint layer with the existing paint layer underneath will cause the finish to fail and peel away. Next, using 320 grit sandpaper, sand down the surface, going down to the base coat. A backing pad can be used here to help achieve even pressure across the surface without causing any waves. But with the fender flare being an odd shape, you can also go over using the palm of your hand on the sharper curves and contours. If you are working with a steel panel, it can be completely stripped down to bare metal if you wish, or sanded down to the same manner as I am showing here. You'll need to feather in those transition lines between the peel and clear coat, meaning the edges are tapered and will be hidden once the new paint layer is on. The whole fender flare will be getting painted. It wasn't required to go over the whole flare with 320 grit sandpaper, however, on those unaffected areas, this will be sanded down with 400 grit, and the primer can lightly fade over these areas, ensuring those 320 areas are sufficiently covered. Clean the flare using a wax and grease remover to clean away any contaminants. Primer won't be applied over the whole flare, it'll only be applied on the peeling areas that was sanded down with 320 grit. Considering this is a plastic panel, any areas where the plastic is exposed, shown by the black spots, will require an adhesion promoter for a stronger bond. Wait 5 minutes and then apply a high build primer to those peeling areas. You'll be looking at 2 to 3 coats depending on the thickness and coverage. Wait 5 to 10 minutes in between coats, first starting with a light coat and then a medium to fully wet coat for the final 2. Depending on the color of your vehicle, the color of the primer can affect the final color of the paint's finish. Allow the primer to dry for about an hour and then sand the whole fender flare down with 400 grit sandpaper. Considering this is a metallic paint, finish up with a 600 grit sandpaper over the whole fender flare. Using the paint code from the vehicle, you can have a custom paint mixed to match your vehicle. Clean the flare using isopropyl alcohol to remove any contaminants on the surface. This is being redone using a 2-stage paint consisting of a base coat and clear coat. However, for an even cheaper route, a single-stage paint can also be used, and this method can be found on some of my other auto body repair videos. Apply the paint to the surface. The first coat will be light, and I have focused on the primed areas. You'll need to wait 5 to 10 minutes in between coats. This can vary depending on the thickness of paint and your weather conditions. Apply the second coat to the whole flare. This will help cover in any slight differences between the existing and new paint. The 2 final coats will be a medium to fully wet coats. Applying the third coat will be on the whole fender flare. Now, if you are touching up a larger area, you can also fade the areas in between the new and old paint, and I'll show you that in a moment. Next, you'll need to wait 30 minutes to 1 hour before applying a clear coat. Waiting too soon may not allow the paint to cure enough where the chemicals can get trapped and cause the clear coat to peel. But if you wait too long, then the clear coat may not bond properly to the base coat, and this can also cause peeling. For specific wait times, you can also refer to your product specification sheets. First, applying a light coat of clear coat. I'm using a 1K clear coat, which is the cheaper version. A 2K clear coat can be used as well. This is a much better quality, however it is more expensive. Wait about 10 minutes in between coats. Apply the next coat, this time being a medium to fully wet coat. Considering I will be wet sanding the clear coat to achieve a high quality shine, a third coat will be applied so I have enough material to work with. And finally apply a third full wet coat of clear. If you are planning on wet sanding and then polishing, you'll need to wait until the paint is hard enough to work with. This can take at least a week or more depending on the thickness of paint and your climate. I will touch on the wet sanding process towards the end of the video, but I also have a full in-depth video covering that topic. Moving on to the fender, this will be the same process, but instead of working with plastic components, we have a metal base. Remove any components which can cause a tape edge or may get damaged during the sanding process. Here I have already removed the fender flare and marker light, both of which I do have tutorials on specifically for this truck. Tape off any surrounding areas where you don't want to get damaged by sanding. Where the clear coat is peeling just like before, we need to remove a clear coat layer so it doesn't peel again. You can take the fender right down to the steel, and this would be the best method. Instead, I have cut back the clear coat layer down to the base coat, primer, or in some spots the metal base is showing through. For this I am using 320 grit sandpaper. As you're sanding, you'll notice the different layers. A backing pad can also be used to help evenly sand the surface, or use the palm of your hand. Now here's a perfect example as to why it's important to ensure that failing clear coat layer has been stripped back on the panel. Once I removed the tape, where the paint still appeared in good condition, the clear coat did come with it. Now the lower portion of the fender will also need to be sanded down. Once done, give the fender a final clean using a wax and grease remover. Unfortunately, it was getting dark when I was finishing this up. I wanted to have the surface somewhat sealed to have a light layer of protection on the bare metal. Mask off the surrounding areas using tape and paper. Just like my other repair videos, I like to use packaging paper from my car parts I ordered online. It's cheap and the paint will soak in, reducing the chance of any paint flaking off, which can end up on the finished surface. All the areas which were sanded with 320 grit sandpaper will be covered with primer. Fold the paper back so we don't have any hard tape edges, which can cause blending issues after. Wipe the surface again using a wax and grease remover to clean away any contaminants. Using a high build primer, this will provide a thick layer as opposed to a regular primer. The high build primer helps fill in any surface imperfections such as a coarse sanding marks left from the 320 grit sandpaper. First coat will be a light layer, wait 5 to 10 minutes in between those coats, and then apply 2 additional coats, which will be medium to fully wet coats. The primer should be dry in a couple hours to work with, removing the masking paper after the final coat so there is minimal chance of hard edges. To remove any orange peel or level out the surface, sand the primer down using 400 grit sandpaper. I left this for a couple days before I was able to get back to it, and we did get hit with some snow. I am working in above freezing temperatures. You can apply paint in the cold, but be extremely careful. Paint can run much easier in the cold, it takes longer to cure, and you'll need to watch for frost if your painted components are left outside. Ideally, you don't want to paint in temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, otherwise the paint won't cure. This can vary between products. Some paints can be applied at even colder temperatures and still cure properly. Next, moving up to 600 grit sandpaper. Backer pads can be used or the palm of your hand. Don't use your fingers as you can cause waves in the surface. Go over the transition lines between the primer and existing paint. Feather in any edges to remove those hard lines. Careful around the body lines, as these are areas which can be easily sanded through. If metal becomes visible, clean the area with a solvent and then touch it up with primer. Considering I am using a 2-stage paint, the base coat will be applied a few inches past the primer. It'll be somewhat of a fade, as there may be some differences between the new and existing paint. Just past those 600 grit marks, where the base coat fade will be, there will be a clear coat transition too. You'll need to sand this using 1000 grit sandpaper for the clear coat. If the 1000 grit sanding marks aren't fully covered with clear coat, they can still be polished out. Clean the area using isopropyl alcohol and a lint-free cloth to remove any contaminants. Again, tape off the panel. Overspray can travel quite a ways, so make sure the vehicle is well protected. This truck will eventually get a full exterior detail, so I'm not overly worried about overspray. I also removed the light clip so it won't need to be taped off, and it's one less tape edge. The body shop who painted this truck before took the lazy route and left that clip in, which got painted over. Just before paint, clean the area again using isopropyl alcohol to ensure all contaminants are removed. Mix the can accordingly, then apply a light coat to the fender, covering up the primer. Considering it is colder outside, I'll have to wait at least 10 minutes for each of those paint layers to set up. As the paint gets thicker, it'll be closer to 15 minutes. It's best to go for the harder edges first, and then finish up on the larger, more exposed areas. That way you can reduce the amount of overspray, and you'll have a nicer quality shine on the exposed areas. Apply the next coat, this time around a little further with that fade line. Try not to go over the clear coat transition area. This should be a medium to fully wet coat. You can angle the can so the overspray is directly away from the clear coat transition area, and instead it's facing towards where the primer was. And finally apply the third coat. This should be a wet coat, while being careful not to get any runs or drips. If a run or drip occurs, you'll need the base coat to dry first, then repair the mistake by sanding and touching up the area. Wait 30 minutes to 1 hour before applying the clear coat. This can vary between products. For this I am using a 2K clear coat instead of the 1K clear which was used earlier on the fender flares. The 2K clear coat is much easier to work with. It has a activator, and once that's pushed, you have less than 24 hours for a work period. It's more durable, however it is more expensive. The first coat will be a lighter coat. Wait 10 to 15 minutes in between coats, closer to 15 minutes when it's colder outside. The second layer will be a medium to fully wet coat, and finally the third layer will be a fully wet coat. If you do get a run in the final paint layer, it's not the end of the world, as it can still be wet sanded out, and I will save that procedure for another video. Remove any masked off areas within a couple minutes after that final coat to ensure there is minimal chance of hard edges. Then allow the clear coat to cure. 2K clear does harden much quicker than compared to 1K, however, I would still wait at least a week to be safe. Once the clear coat is hard enough to work with, this isn't necessarily needed, but if you want to achieve a high quality shine that blends with the rest of the vehicle, you can wet sand and then polish. I do have a more in-depth video for this, but I'll give you a basic overview. First, ensure the surface is clean, free of any contaminants which may damage the paint surface. Using only a wet-dry compatible sandpaper, pre-soak it in a bucket of water with some car wash soap mixed in to help for lubrication. Wet the surface and evenly sand the surface, either using a backing pad or the palm of your hand with 1000 grit sandpaper. Wet sanding will remove any orange peel and any other surface imperfections, providing crisp clarity in the paint. Once most of the orange peel has been removed, move up to 1500 grit sandpaper. Keep that area wet and rinse the sandpaper and components off as needed to remove any sanding residue. Careful around any body lines or edges, as these can sand through easier than compared to other areas. And finally finish up with 2000 grit sandpaper. This is the final grit before moving on to the polishing process. In order to bring that shine back, this can be done by hand or using a machine polisher. Use a soft cloth or a polishing pad. Apply a polishing compound and then work it on the surface. Work times can vary between polishes, and when done, use a microfiber cloth to remove any compound residue. A wax or sealant can be applied at least 1 month after the paint was applied. This will allow the paint to fully cure. Reinstall any components which were removed. I did remove the rubber gaskets and the fender flares. This stops any debris from getting trapped in behind the flare and also reduces the flare from rubbing on the fender. I used a automotive grade weather stripping adhesive to reattach those gaskets back into place. New clips were also purchased for the fender flares, as most of them did break. No more peeling on the fender flares or fender. When done correctly, this can be a permanent fix. New videos are released every week on my channel. Be sure to hit that thumbs up button, it's a huge help to me, and leave a comment below if you found this tutorial helpful. Don't forget to follow my social media pages such as Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to keep up to date with my latest projects. And if you're not a subscriber, be sure to also hit that subscribe button. Thank you for watching.